This week on Dig Me Out. With your hosts, Jason Ziak and Tim Minichi.
Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. You can help us make the next episode happen by joining us at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. Jay, I don't think people are aware that you actually have a full name. I only call you Jay, but your full name is actually Jason, which I've never actually said on the show before in the last 11 years.
Indeed.
So people out there should know you do have a full name. You've not just allocated a single letter on your birth certificate.
And if you met me in real life, I probably would introduce myself as Jason.
Which is always weird when I hear
you'd be
you say it. Whenever I've heard you say, I'm Jason, I go, who? Who's that guy?
I do the same thing when I see because when you write your name, you tend to say Timothy.
Right.
But I don't know of anybody that calls you Timothy. And I don't hear you refer to yourself as Timothy. So what is our problem? What are we doing?
I don't know. I think Gen X rebelled against multi-symbolic letters or names. We were like, you know what, Terry, we ain't having it. Christopher, I'm Tim. He's Jay. That's it.
There you go.
If I could go with T, I'd be fine with that too. But it sounds a little weird. Speaking of, what's up, Wit?
Weird. Speaking of weird, yeah, guy with two last names, yeah, right, or whatever. Everything's good.
That's Whitney Beeler. He's been here before, so many episodes that if I name them all, it would be about half the episodes we've done. I'll name a few. I'll name the ones recently. Shades Apart last year. That was an album we did mid-pandemic, the Eyewitness episode. And then the year before that, it was Dada's American Highway Flower, Caviar's self-titled, Human Radio's self-titled, and the Tories' Wonderful Life. You also joined us for some roundtables here and there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that time again.
It is
in the January to February to March area. That's where we usually talk about a record you've picked. And lo and behold, that's why you're back with us, because you've picked another record. So enough talking. Let's start with, what album did you pick?
Deathray by Deathray.
Deathray. So you went with this is now your third self-titled record that you've picked. I'm sensing that you like self-titled albums.
I guess I do. I never really even noticed that I did, but I do, I guess.
Because then you don't have to remember what the name of the album is. You just go, it's Deathray by Deathray. Yep. It's Caviar by Caviar. It's Human Radio by Human Radio. It's much simpler than. How did you come upon this band? Because this is not a well-known band.
Nope. I think I just heard the first track on the album, my Lunatic friends. I think I heard it once on a modern rock station here in town, in Minneapolis, and liked it and just bought it, and it just kind of stuck with me. Went on repeat, and that was it. I listened to it all the time. Not a very exciting story, I know.
No, it's not. Work on it. Workshop it for the next time we talk about Deathray. Jay,
which will be never.
Yeah, exactly. This is what we call a Marvelous 3 rule episode, because this album actually came out in 2000. We don't cover the 2000s unless there is a significant connection to the 90s. We've done this before, because Marvelous 3, we reviewed their second album, and their first album came out in the 90s, so that was the grace period. We don't do 2001. Only 2000 is the year that we will grace period in. So, Jay, had you heard Deathray?
No, totally under my radar.
Me too.
Never heard of them.
Cool, so I've done it again. All right.
Yeah, here's how we squeezed them in. Former members of Cake, Greg Brown and Victor Damiani. I think that's how you say it. Who knows? They formed this band in 1998. They left Cake, hooked up with Dana Gumbiner, who was in a band called Little Guilt Shrine. And they also brought in some other folks, drummer James Neal and keyboardist Max Hart. They made an EP and then they got signed to Capricorn Records, and their debut album was released in 2000. So that's how we get the 2000 release, because they were in Cake in the 90s. So there's no, I don't want any grumbling that we're going crazy here.
I saw a little bit on the Discord and I was like, oh boy, what have I done? I don't know if this 2000 rule is going to be a big issue here at this point, but I see you very capably handled the fallout.
I did.
Tim.
And the album was produced by Eric Valentine, who also produced albums by Third Eye Blind, Smash Mouth, and Citizen King.
Smash Mouth, I'm right there. That's why. That's the influence that I was looking for.
There you go.
What got you in?
And
that's what got me in, yep.
So
I
this
think he did a Maroon 5 album too, by the way.
Oh, he did?
Before they really stunk. I think it was It Won't Be Soon Before Long. The second one after the
There's a time
bluesy one.
Never
or
mind,
whatever.
I'm not gonna bash Marvelous, or what are they called again?
Maroon 5. We don't have to talk
5.
about them.
I was gonna say Marvelous 3, Maroon 5.
Not a fan, by the way.
Is there a 4 band we can put in there as well?
Foreigner 4. No, I don't know. That's not
Mayfield 4.
Mayfield 4. There we go. Maroon 5, Mayfield 4, Marvelous 3. So their second album, Believe Me, came out in 2005, but that was self-released. Eric Valentine also produced that one. And then the band kind of went their separate ways. They had a website until about 2007. They were playing shows. Members were in and out a little bit, but yeah. So they were really together for 2
They
records.
did have an EP too, Tim, in 2005. They had a little 5-track EP called White Sleeves, which is pretty good.
So here's the question I have on their Wikipedia page under genres. It says alternative rock, pop punk, pop rock, new wave, and ska punk.
What?
I'm not hearing any ska punk in this, that's for sure.
I was going to ask you, so I didn't hear on this record, and we'll get into the overall record, but on their other releases, have you listened to them, and do they have a ska punk sound on those?
No.
All right. Well, somebody is jacked up Wikipedia. I don't know who's in charge of Wikipedia, but they need to fix that.
Who did this?
Get the Wikipedia guy on the phone and have him correct that.
Yeah, it's not correct.
Over at Patreon, we put up a post. We let people vote and comment. I know it's very dangerous when we do that because you don't know how it's going to turn out. Let's go see what they say. And we'll share their comments. So Willie Dillon said, it's all right, but it's not really exciting me. Better EP. And then he apologized. Sorry, Whitney.
Yeah, the things I do for that guy, and this is what he does for me.
He actually felt bad about that.
I think he did.
Nate Smith said, hadn't heard of this, but there's some solid harmonies and interesting songwriting. Didn't hear any strong candidates for singles, but overall I dig it. Also, not a bad album to throw on in the summer, whilst eating crawdads and shucking corn. And I responded, that's very specific imagery.
It's a little different, yeah.
Crawdads and shucking corn. Is Nate in New Orleans or like in the Bayou? I didn't know that. Nate, we'll have to discuss that at a future time. Because that sounds very Baton Rouge.
Sure does.
To me. I don't know. And then John Siemens said, I recently just discovered this band and this album. I was getting really into Cake last year and saw that their guitarist and bassist left after Fashion Nugget to start this band. That to me is crazy that they left after the breakthrough of Fashion Nugget and we're like, we're going to go start another band. Like, okay. But anyway, I love both of their playing on Fashion Nugget, so had to check out Deathray. This album doesn't sound like what I thought it would, but I really love some of the songs, most notably Only Lies. I'll go with Worthy album because even if I don't love some of the songs, they're bearable because they're all pretty short.
I don't know. That's kind of a
backhanded compliment.
Kind of a shot below the belt a little bit there, I think, isn't it? They're really
It's
short, so they're not that
bearable
annoying.
because they don't last long.
Yeah, right.
Which
I don't know.
I'm not even gonna relate
It's logic.
that to. Yeah. Oh look, there's a polar bear behind Jay.
He's attacking me.
The dog wandering.
Yes.
Didn't see it.
Giant dog that just wandered in. The size of a small automobile.
He makes it hard to type.
So we'll get to the actual poll results, which just ended prior to this show, of where the album better EP, decent single, when we share our opinions at the end. But Jay, let's talk about what worked and didn't work for us. Tell me one thing you liked about the self-titled album by Deathray.
I really like the tight production on this record. It has a very unique sound. It's one of those records where it's pretty dry. There's not a ton of reverb or space in it. Oftentimes it almost sounds a bit direct, meaning like the amps are small sounding. The bass is kind of compact and fuzzy. The drums tend to be like more drum machine sounding, or as opposed to live drums. And I think what's cool about it is that with these really like sharp, well crafted pop songs, it just gives it a unique sound. So instead of it just sounding like an average power pop band, or maybe like Weezer, which some of these songs could sound like, it goes into, I think, a place it's a little bit more unique. You can hear the harmonies more. You hear some keyboard stuff that's really interesting that maybe wouldn't pop out as much because the guitars tend to be a little smaller, so you have all this room for either kind of keyboard leads or even keyboard synth, which adds a cool texture. And then I think overall, the songs are just so well crafted. Like I mentioned before, they're not overly like I don't know, they still have energy to them. Like they do a really good job of thinking about dynamics and keeping the song moving and interesting. They are on the short side, they tend to be under 3 minutes. So they're super compact. They tend to, they're going to follow a rough kind of verse chorus bridge, but there are a couple songs here where, like Scott is an example, the structure's a bit off. It takes a little while. It just in the way it builds and resolves is a bit unexpected.
Scott, why'd you have to do it? Why couldn't you see through it? Like us, you tore through her bolted soul. You made it past the toll, but I paid the cost. 'Cause people like the same things that you do. People like the same things that you do. 'Cause people like the same things that you do. People like the same things.
There's actually a couple on here where as the song's ending, I found myself thinking like, wow, they really could have probably done that chorus another time or two. It's so compact and sharp that you won't hear me say this often, but they probably could have extended some of these a little bit more even. So again, a pretty unique sound. The only other record that came to mind, I think Whitney, you had picked this one in the past, was Caviar. In terms of like the way it's produced, this is a little less I guess it sounds more band oriented, even though there's a lot of studio stuff going on here. There's something about the way that the songs are structured, it still feels like live musicians and performances. So I really like the sound of the record, and then I think it tends to serve the songs really well. The singer the way he sings is it's very controlled. He's not overly emotive. He doesn't push a lot of air. It's kind of in a Rivers Cuomo type delivery, which this production really helps a lot because, if it was too loud or had too much room noise, I think the vocal could get lost. But with this approach, I think it just makes this really like compact, punchy, easy to listen to record that has some surprises. There are layers here. There are some unexpected instruments and sounds. The harmonies are really nice. So it kind of catches your ear at first with this, in your face production that, does have some depth to it and some interesting things going on. So that's some of the stuff I liked. What about you, Tim?
I really like this record overall. It hits all the right spots for me in terms of tight songwriting. I really like that dry production because it serves the song so well. I like the direct guitar sounds. I like when they do a little bit of weirdness here and there, like on Baby Polygon with like the vocoder thing that's happening. And they don't they could saturate a whole song with it, but they don't. Like they just add it for part of the song.
This is the last Saturday, 'cause baby Polygon wants to play. Coming around for devil's cake, rising up out of the lake, 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 out of the
I just think that you can tell that they knew exactly what they wanted to do when they went in with this. There's a total commitment to this really tight power pop songwriting that evoked a wide array of influences and things that if you like this, you might like this. I was listening to What Would You Do? And I was getting a little Jellyfish out of that song. There was a little bit, it's not over the top. Jellyfish could be over the top with their performance, but just in terms of the way that melody was constructed. And then you get songs like My Lunatic Friends, that kind of sounded almost like a really good Fountains of Wayne single.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, as you go through this, you go, I don't know how this wasn't maybe that was the timing with this album because it was 2000 and maybe this needed to be 1997.
Yeah.
When those bands were first starting, but this should have hit. These songs should have been on the radio at the same time as Stacy's Mom or some of the other, the third Weezer album that came out with in what was it 99 or 2000 in that range. It seemed to be right in that sweet spot, and I don't know why it didn't hit because it's really good. It's the melodies, harmonies that happen throughout the record are really strong. It's just there's not an overdone or wasted opportunity on this record, and the fact that only one song goes over 3 minutes, or sorry, 2 songs go over 3 minutes is that's sugar to me.
I was going to say, this is perfect for you guys. It was 13 songs, 34 minutes. I mean, I think I chose it just for that reason, right?
Right. I mean, this is, that is really tough to do. And they could have easily stretched out, like you saying, some of these songs, they could have gone back to the chorus at the end, modulate it and change to another key and get real crazy with it. But it's like they heard, some of the best power pop, even go back to the Cars. There was stuff that reminded me of the Cars. And they were just let's keep it as compact as possible. And I think that really, really works for this record. I can understand why some people would not connect with it completely because it is so direct that it almost feels like demos in some way, but like super awesome demos. But I could imagine like somebody on their computer today making this record with just like home computer equipment, because it's so direct, so tight, so dry that you could probably pull it off at home with like a direct in guitar and some good, like a nice vocal patch or you know, something like that. Like you could pull it off, and it almost sounds too simple in that way. Like I don't think the really thoughtful construction of these songs is present on the first or second listen. I think once you listen to it a couple times, you go, wow, this is like I remembered a lot of these songs over after hearing them a couple times. Like the chorus is just really, and especially at the beginning of the record, it's just like boom, 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 just like hook after hook after hook. And yeah, there wasn't a stinker on here for me. So what works best for you, Whitney?
Oh man, you guys did such a good job of pretty much saying what the same thoughts I have. You know, I have a number of friends, and when I play the music like this, they always really enjoy it, but they don't really listen to it unless I like, you know, I don't know how to put it. I get accused of liking too much of the melodic harmony, the chuggy guitars, the start-stop stuff. You know, I get accused of being just a maniac for that kind of stuff. I mean, this album has that in spades, and it's like it almost to the point of like an Only Lies and Scott and some of those songs, when it almost gets ridiculous that the song is so tight that it almost feels like it's going to implode. You know, and they just come in for 2.5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. The song just kicks it like verse, chorus, and they're out. Maybe there's a solo, maybe there's not. There's acoustic guitar with a keyboard or something that's accompanying it. And the production I like so much because I like albums that have like, you know, like at the beginning of Zero, there's kind of a lead where the guy's counting down to the song, and then there's when they leave a song, it kind of fades into another with some production, little flourishes and things like that. So my teen years probably occurred a little bit before a lot of other DMOers here, and I grew up like late, you know, my mid-teen years were late 70s, early 80s, and geez, I know I don't look that old in camera. No, I'm kidding. A lot of the bands I listened to, you know, were like The Knack, The Cars, Blondie, Cheap Trick, The Police. I mean, even the Go-Go's, right? I mean, it's just like I was like enveloped with this kind of stuff in, you know, maybe a little after the formative years, right? Mid to late teens. This album is, people could say it's deliberately derivative, but I can see that, but I can spot the influences like on, you know, 10:15 definitely has a Beatles feel to it, right? There's a couple of songs here that Weezer probably would have killed people for, but I just think it's just a solid record where they're not worried about, hey, I'm going to show you how good I can play a guitar solo, or I'm going to show you my range when I sing. The guy's got, like Jay said, a real, he didn't say deadpan, but I'll use it. He's got a real deadpan kind of even keeled delivery, right? And yeah, for me, it's always about just melodic hooks. And, you know, like last year I liked a lot of stuff like Quicksand and and King Buffalo and a lot of things I don't normally listen to that I really enjoyed, but I always fall back to this kind of an album, right? It's something I can enjoy. It's kind of it's a fun windows down, like Frisbee in one hand, beer in the other on a summer day, kind of like fun album, right?
Yeah.
So this is kind of the stuff I really gravitate to, and it's kind of, I like upbeat music, and this is one of probably my top 15, 20 albums because I just love the vibe. I just it's kind of embarrassing when I say that I just found it because I heard a song on the radio. I wish there was a deeper story to it, but you know,
That's
it is
okay.
what it is. It's yet another band too. Capricorn Records like just died when they were signed to them. You know, it seems like every band I like, the record company folds, and the band just like, oh, you know, I don't know, what do we do now? So that's the long and short of it. You guys did a great job of covering what I really like about it. So
Cool.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like summer. So that was something.
It reminded me of the Czar self-titled record in that way, because that to me is a like ultimate summer record in terms of power pop albums.
yeah.
One of the songs I wanted to highlight is "Check It Over," which I love the synth on that and the energy of that song. It reminded me of, I don't know if this might be an obscure reference, The Anniversary. Their first album, Designing a Nervous Breakdown, is very synth heavy, like emo pop, I guess, or power pop or punk pop, or I don't know what you want to describe it. But like, I ended up liking their second album better when they got rid of that sound and they went into like a more just straightforward rock sound.
Yeah.
Because I did like, there was stuff that I thought was good, but they were definitely sounded like a young band that hadn't quite like mastered their hooks type of thing, and they were relying on like every song having an amazing synth keyboard lead to like drive the song. And this song has that lead. It also has great hooks vocally, but they also, in the span of like 2 minutes and 10 seconds or 2 minutes 11 seconds, do a lot of really weird and interesting stuff. Like you get about a minute 20 into that song, they start throwing in like chords that are not a part of the scale. You get these like weird dissonant chords, and then there's these little weird percussion parts, and you can tell that they were having fun in the studio, just like messing with these songs that are up on their appearance very straightforward power pop songs, and then finding little spots here and there to twist them. Like Scott's a good example. Like that's a really weird song from a lyrical standpoint. It's the only song that's flagged as explicit for good reason on Spotify. But I don't think a Weezer could pull off a song like that, or a lot of power pop bands. Like that level of restraint and keeping things real small but still emotive is very difficult, and keeping you engaged into the lyrics the way that they do. Again, I think it has to do with the fact that they just keep this so tight from track to track that it makes it easy to go, well, it's 2 minutes and we're already on the next song, so I'll hear it on the second time around. Jay, was there stuff that didn't work for you on this record?
There was, I think by the time I spent, some time with the record and got to the deeper listens, I was wanting the singer to just emote a bit more. I think he's got the control and the range. I'm just wanting like just these moments to happen that are just much more, just jump out and grab you. And I think it's so controlled that it can just kind of wash over you. It's definitely a record I put on while I was working, and it would be over in seemingly a second. 1 minute it's so short, but then also it's just like it's so consistent and controlled that I found myself like not being pulled in as much like emotionally as I wanted to be. And I'm wondering if like the vocals could help with that. Just either, some parts that are just he's pushing more air, or singing in a slightly different voice, or I don't know what, but like something that really just, when you are fading it reaches out and it grabs you a bit. I think that would help. It could maybe also be done with, I don't know, guitars or I don't know what, but maybe there's an instrument missing or but just overall, it can be so tight that it's almost a flaw of the record, if that makes sense.
I totally agree with you. There was like one or two spots where the vocalist needed to just like scream it out at the end of a song, like just be built into such a fury of energy to just like lose it, or have the guitar player just shred for 10 seconds in an, like you would hear on a like a Weezer song on Pinkerton.
Yeah.
After hearing the tightness of the Blue Album on Pinkerton, then you got to hear Rivers Cuomo like go off on some really shredding tangents. He did the same thing on Maladroit, and I don't need a 5-minute long solo, but give me 10 seconds of mayhem.
Yeah, just a little bit of looseness to remind me,
right,
these are humans, and these are emotions, and it just or to hear the emotion that he's singing about and would be nice. And I think a balance of it is what I'm talking about. Like, give me like, every third or fourth song, some moment like that happens. Even when the guitar solos or keyboard solos are super creative and really cool, they're still so like precise and planned out. Even the way the effects work, you're like, oh, that is a perfect edit, and like he turned that on exactly the right time and had the knob turn exactly the right way. Like everything is so crafted that just a bit more spontaneity or life, I think, would go a long way to really put this album over the top.
Yeah, it's a very studio album in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, I think they probably had the bones of these songs ahead of time, but it sounds like everything was built from the ground up in the studio after getting like a drum loop down and vocals, and then layering and pulling things out. I do think it's interesting because you could definitely tell that like they pulled things out and put things in that were really interesting, but would be difficult to play live. I would imagine this would be a little maybe more raucous live, hopefully, because you couldn't do all this studio stuff that would require that you just couldn't mix that sort of sound live as cleanly. So is there anything that doesn't work for you on this album, Whit?
I can see some of what you guys are saying about the vocals. I love studio albums, and like especially maybe even overproduced studio albums a bit. I just like that extra creativity. I'm just not a big like the power pop thing, right? I kind of associate myself with it like on Discord or whatever, and I'm a fan, but I'm not really a fan of like pure what purists would call power, pure power pop or whatever, right? I'm not. I like Badfinger and Big Star and stuff, but I'm not into jangle pop, right? It seems like I like that mix of like new wave, and I was hoping to kind of hear a little bit more about this band is more new wave, right, than power pop, because I don't think it's really it's definitely power pop, but it's also there's a whole lot of new wave influence there, right? I hear a whole lot of Cars, and I do hear Weezer all over the place, but I think it's true. I think there's some songs like Happy New Year, obviously, and this time he does stretch a little bit vocally, but never for much time. I think it's just a real energetic record, but you're right. There's a lot of control. There's a lot of, just keep it moving type stuff, you know. But from a song perspective, I think there isn't a song here that I skip. I think Legionnaires in Doubt is a terrific song. And Now That I'm Blind is a great like mid-tempo kind of ballad. And I just think there's a nice mix here. Jay mentioned that you put it on, it just flies by. It really does. It's not like a moments album, right? It's not something where it's like, oh, I know in this song at like 3.5 minutes in, this dude's going to go on for a 2.5 minute guitar solo and is kicking ass, you know. That doesn't happen on this record. So, and that's something I appreciate it for, because it's a little bit more, I don't know how I say it's a fun album and kind of exciting, but it's subdued as well. So as weird as that sounds, I can see where it could do with a few more moments perhaps, or a few like extended songs. Like they could have blew Happy New Year as an end track into something that was 5 or 6 minutes long. You know, a few of these songs go by so fast you don't even really have time to take them in. But yeah, that's other than that, I don't have too many complaints about this record.
I think Only Lies is a good example where that's just such a great hook, and the song's only 2 minutes. It like could have used another 30 seconds, maybe.
That's
like,
the one that at the end I'm just like, this guitar is so sharp and just so. And I'm not a guitar player, you guys, so forgive me if this isn't but it's like just this palmed power chord, and it's like tug 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 tug, you know, and it's so tight that it almost like disappears or something. I don't know how to explain it, but it's so cool when it goes that I'm like, come on, give it another like 30 seconds or something for me, will you? So yeah, can see that.
So this came out in 2000, and I was looking through like 99, 2000, 2001 in terms of what was coming out and what would be like similar. It's a weird time because I feel like anything that was remotely melodic that you could say, because, you know, Weezer was there and then they disappeared. But they left this huge sort of void that was filled in some ways by like Green Day becoming a little bit more commercial, stepping, you know, moving away from punk and becoming more of like a pop punk band in the more pop end. And you had bands like Blink-182 obviously becoming popular in that era. There was a band called the X's that had an album out this year. That was sort of, but I feel like those records, the guitars were more almost getting back into like a metal, not like new metal sound, but just like a big guitar sound, that this album is not quite in that area. So I could see why a record label would maybe be having trouble figuring out, you know, where do we fit this? Because, you know, at the time you're dealing with like Godsmack and, you know, Creed and stuff on the radio. And then you've got Blink-182 and stuff. But this isn't quite there either. Like it's just a little bit
just
too
like
clever in some ways.
Is this like a Marvelous 3? I mean, you could associate these guys with some of the stuff Marvelous 3 were doing, and maybe even could I stretch and say like Local H's album As Good as Dead, maybe something like that. That's a stretch maybe, but like there was like bands like High Speed Scene, and oh man, what were some other ones that were very much like this, right at the turn of the 99, 2000, 2001. Oh my gosh.
I was thinking of like, I mean, there in terms of like pop punk, the stuff that was like blowing up. Like this is the year that SR-71 had an album out.
Yeah.
That went gold. This might have been the year. I'm trying to think of what other.
Well, I think even something like the Hives, you know, there are moments on here where it reminds me, you know, that's a band that's hooky, compact.
Like the Vines, maybe, if a little bit of the Vines stuff. Maybe.
Yeah. But both of those guys know how to really use their vocals.
Yeah.
In a way that evokes people like Kurt Cobain with their ability to like howl essentially, or I don't know what you want to say, like how whatever you want to say it, but like let loose with the vocal in the way that it doesn't happen on here because it's so controlled.
Here are some bands that Apple thinks are like Deathray.
Okay.
Self.
Oh.
Yeah, I could say a little.
I can see. Yeah, I can see that for sure.
Apples in Stereo. Not familiar. Starlight Mints.
Not so much with the Apples in Stereo. Maybe a little bit.
Imperial Teen.
Maybe. They're a little.
And Creeper Lagoon.
What was Stacey Jones' band? I'm forgetting the name.
American Hi-Fi.
American Hi-Fi. Like again, like
Letters to Cleo, maybe
slightly bigger guitar on American Hi-Fi, but not too far. Like, in the same ballpark.
Yeah, that's a good one actually. American Hi-Fi is pretty close.
Yeah, there's
maybe Sugar Cult, maybe I don't know.
Yeah. There was definitely a movement in the early 2000s to make bands like I think we're mentioning here that were power pop oriented, tended to big hooky stuff, but tended to probably be a little bit more guitar heavy than this. But there's some synth stuff going on too.
Right.
But try to make one of those bands break, and like none of them really. I mean, American Hi-Fi kind of broke, but most of them didn't. They just couldn't cut through the new metal, like depressing stuff.
Yeah.
But there was definitely a scene going on.
Is there is there like some line you could draw between this band and like early Fall Out Boy or the Stereo who we were talking about, or somebody was talking about? I was kind of last week, but
because some of it was like then getting emo adjacent. It was sort of like this. You had between the pop punk, emo, these bands, like they could kind of intermix and like be on bills together, and fans could cross over, but like emo and power pop or power punk, what am I trying to say?
Pop
punk broke, and this stuff didn't. Maybe because it didn't have we're struggling to like come up with a name for it. Maybe that's part of the problem.
Well, it's funny. I think like if you look at Vagrant Records around this time with the Anniversary and Hey Mercedes and a lot of those bands, like if this was a band under a different name that was like on Vagrant Records, this probably would be like a cult classic record.
Right.
Because it's not that far off from a lot of that stuff that was on at that time. It was more in the emo world, but really you go back and listen to those records now and you're like, this is pretty poppy.
Yep.
Yeah. I wish I had a memory, and I wish I was staring at my my library, because it's full of stuff like
what do you mean? It's right behind you. I can see it.
I was doing some creative backgrounding like Tim, like you do sometimes. It's like you can't see this like bedroom I'm sitting in. That's pathetic.
I got tired of looking for new pictures every week. I need to just settle on one. Or I actually thought about, I saw where people do videos as their background, but of them like walking in and like walking by themselves.
Oh God.
And I was like, that seems like a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I could figure out how to do it, so I'm not, but maybe someday. Let's talk about our overall ratings on this record. First, well, let's do ours. I will save the poll for last. Jay, where do you land on this record? Worthy album, better EP, or decent single?
I landed worthy album. I think it's a fun, active listen, and also it's a good record you can put on if you just want to be in a good mood while you're working or driving. It works both ways. If you want to dig into it deeper, there's a lot of really clever production stuff going on, and harmonies, and like you said, Tim, a song like Check It Over, seemingly on the surface, it's a very simple power chord riff, but they mess with it so much that it makes it fun, as something to, kind of geek out to and listen to deeply.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it gives you quite a bit on a lot of different levels. And again, it's 35 minutes, right? So it's a quick listen and well worth your time.
I agree with you. I think it's a worthy album. There might be a song or two that you might not dig if they get too slow or too poppy or whatever. You think it's too cheesy. I just think that this is just a really tight 35 minutes, like you said, and it's goes by so fast. It was like, I mean, there are some bands that put out albums twice this length and can't hold my attention. So 35 minutes, 13 songs. I don't really have anything to diss, as far as particular songs. So I enjoyed it all. Whitney?
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I'm always a little apologetic when I come. I've had quite a few records that I've talked with you about that have been just blatantly melodic, and I just enjoy that kind of music. And it's
Never
fun
apologize.
No, I'm not really apologizing
for anything ever. That's what I've learned.
Yeah,
apologies are for weakness. Are weakness. Never apologize.
Yeah, and I just think it's interesting. It's like it's nice to have a little bit of change of pace, because sometimes we're on like the shoegaze stuff a little bit, and the post-hardcore stuff gets a little crazy sometimes. And I'm just like, I'm just going to throw something out there that's totally kind of, I don't know, refreshing's not a good word, but just that's a lot of fun, and it's not too, I don't even know what half these songs are about really. I think they've got some clever lyrics on it. I guess we didn't even really talk about lyrics, but they touch on a few things that are a little bit deeper than your average boy meets girl power pop song or whatever. But yeah, I love this record. I always have. It's like I said, it's probably a top 20 record for me for sure. Yeah.
Well, the patrons did not agree with us.
I know.
60-40, they went better EP over Worthy Album. Everybody's got their opinion. And
well, I'm very glad you guys agreed with me.
Well, there you go. That's all that matters, is that, from an awkwardness standpoint, it always makes it better when we line up with our guest, as opposed to an awkward conversation where we take a dump on a record while they're staring at us.
I'm gonna dump a stat on you. All right, this is my 5th record you guys have reviewed with me, like that I've picked.
Yeah.
And the only one that hasn't been unanimous worthy album is the second one, Human Radio, was I can't remember which one of you guys gave it a better EP and the other one said worthy. So I've only missed. I'm 9 out of 10 for worthy album votes. So I'm gonna give myself that pat on the back.
Nice.
I'm doing something right with you guys. I don't know what it isn't.
That's a pretty good batting average.
Yeah, I know. I think so too. That's why I had to bring it up this time.
That's pretty good. I would be curious if, for people who've been on here multiple times with picks, like where they're at. We should track that. We need to have a Wikipedia just for this podcast.
Yeah, right.
Who wants to build that for us for free? Because we're not going to pay for that. That's just not going to happen.
Just call Mr. Wiki.
Yeah, who's the Wikipedia guy?
No, he blew it with the ska punk thing. We don't want him keeping track.
Oh, that's true. He did.
Ska punk.
Probably one of his interns messed that up. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. Wit, I think this is a perfect album for this podcast because, we never would have found it on our own, but it fits in perfectly with the, the mission statement, and has an interesting connection to the 90s. So, and yeah,
I still get a charge of bringing something and having people hear it and they end up liking it. I still get kind of a charge out of that. So I'm glad you guys liked it.
And I want to remind people that they can also join us like this by becoming a patron at Patreon. Join the union, dmounion.com, digmeoutunion.com. It starts as little as $2 a month to join, and you get to vote in the polls like the one for this episode. Also get to vote in our monthly album polls, which are submitted at digmeoutpodcast.com. It's also where you go to sign up for the Box newsletter. It comes out every week with new releases, as well as reviews of music, movies, TV shows, documentaries, novellas, short stories, webcam,
graphic novels,
YouTube, skits, backyard performances, and whatever else that's relevant to the 80s and 90s music that we cover on this show. And lastly, if you like what you heard, Apple Podcasts is where you go to leave some positive feedback. So we'll see you in a year, Whit. Unless you join us for a roundtable, then we'll see you at a roundtable.
Sounds good.
All right. For Jay, I'm Tim. We're out. We'll be back next week with another episode of Dig Me Out.
It's not like